This is Robert Stark. I'm joined here with Richard Spencer. Richard, it's great talking to you.
Yeah, it's good to be back on your show. It's been a little while, maybe a year or so.
Yeah, it's been probably about a couple years.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm also joined here with Francis Nally and Brandon Adamson.
Hi, guys.
Hey guys.
There's been a lot of stuff going on in the news with Richard Spencer and also just general politics. I think a good place to start is with Trump because I remember there was this period where there was all this enthusiasm with Trump, and now we've gotten into about a year and a half into Trump's presidency, and the big thing in the news is Trump's appointment of John Bolton, who's pretty much like the ultimate neocon.
Oh yeah. I mean, he's actually offensive to many neocons. He's offensive to many people in the deep state, just in the sense of his almost outlandish comments and desires to create wars, particularly in Iran. But he is a massive, violent hawk when it comes to Russia, when it comes to North Korea, all the hotspots. Um, yeah, I mean, I have to say, my hopes for Trump have really been dashed. I mean, I never thought that he was going to be, you know, this identitarian who was going to inaugurate the ethno state or something. I wasn't too caught up in that both right wing and in a way a right wing fantasy and left wing nightmare. But the things that I did think I did really count on him in terms of foreign policy. I definitely thought that the wall would be well underway by now. And I thought that he was going to be just so alienated and alienated from and alienating to the mainstream conservative movement, that he was going to do all of these kind of left, right, outside the box type things, big infrastructure deals, put the put people who are victims of the opioid crisis to work, rebuilding infrastructure, rebuilding the wall, do some things that have been classified as liberal over the past few decades. And I've just simply been wrong. I mean, my hopes have been dashed. His foreign policy has not been all that bad. He has basically maintained the status quo. His actions against Syria were, they did not eventuate into any kind of war. He's maintained the status quo in Afghanistan, in Iraq. He seems to want to reach out to Russia or just be normal with Russia. But he hasn't quite been able to achieve that. In terms of immigration, there are some good things to say about the RAISE Act. There are many things that I wouldn't say very kindly about it. His attempt to trade DACA for an end to chain migration was very interesting, and I actually praised him for this. I was one of the very few who was saying, well, this is actually a really good deal. This is interesting. This is changing the paradigm, and that would be to grant a DACA amnesty in exchange for ending chain migration.
Because the basic conservative talking points is it's about legal versus illegal immigration, but this completely changes the dichotomy.
Exactly.
It's about the numbers.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've mentioned this before. It's when I would go to conservative gatherings previously, like CPAC or something like that. Again, it was all, we just love legal immigration, and you didn't hear a lot of talk about chain migration. I don't think there was much awareness of what chain migration is, how the current immigration system really works. This is the paradigm. Since 1965, the paradigm has effectively been A, non-discrimination, and B, family reunification or chain migration. And Donald Trump was actually trying to change that. So that whole we love legals but hate illegals was transformed, and it was like, no, we have to really deal with legal immigration, and that was a step forward. But it's ultimately come to naught. I mean, that deal was interesting, but Chuck Schumer announced pretty forthrightly that there was no deal. He would, he grasped. Chuck Schumer understands what chain migration is. He grasped that this is dramatically changing the character of the United States, and it's certainly in a way that supports the Democratic Party. So it was an interesting try, but I don't think there's going to be another chance. I mean, I don't want to. I'm not a doom and gloom, person, and I'm ultimately optimistic, but the prospects of immigration reform, let's say respectable, sensible, kosher, if you will, Republican immigration reform. I mean, the prospects are approaching zero at this point. It is going to be very, very difficult for the GOP to increase their majority in Congress, to increase, I think they might very well lose the House. They might hold on to the Senate, but even that is ultimately in jeopardy in one of these wave-like snapback elections. So again, what has really been accomplished? Some tax cuts, some Republican stuff. It's been rather sad. I mean, we were so euphoric in 2016 and in the beginning of 2017 that we, as a whole movement, I think got way out ahead of ourselves and got very excited about, we've reached this synthesis where, our ideas as white nationalists are being implemented through a kind of mainstream Republican that is someone who isn't us, but who's able to reach conservative voters. And it was an amazing synthesis. And I don't regret getting excited. I think it's good to seize opportunities and so on. I look back upon it fondly. So I don't have any regrets or ill will, but we also need to take a reality pill about what is happening. And, the Trump administration, from the perspective of an identitarian, is really not going anywhere in terms of policy. Now, Trump is creating these culture war, moments for us, but certainly the whole country is just so radically polarized that everything's political. The left is escalating. I think the Overton window is shifting in both directions.
It's interesting. It's interesting to see if he adopted his original strategy, which is a fusion of American nationalism with a kind of centrist populism. If that original strategy was implemented, would the country be as polarized as it is?
It's a good question. I think it probably would be as polarized as it is, because at the end of the day, the left is not reacting to policy. They're not reacting even to, let's say some corruption or some kind of, the Michael Flynn situation, Ivanka and Jared in the White House, all this kind of stuff. They're not even reacting to that. Or against or Russia stuff, which is, a lot of insinuation, but not much substance. They're not even reacting to that. They're just reacting to what Donald Trump represents. And that is white America. And so I think, if Donald Trump had become president in the 80s, and he was considering doing this, if he had become president then, he could have been an interesting fusion between a lot of liberal things, liberal on quote liberal in quote on trade, on even some cultural issues, liberal on some basics. He seems to have a heart, if not a head. Liberal on, say, healthcare and things like that. But then very conservative in his general, right wing even in his general attitude and bombast and kind of pro-capitalist ways. It would have been very interesting, but he might have been successful. But at this point, I don't think it works. These MAGA types are just they keep trying to bring. They try to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. They keep trying to bring the country back together again. via patriotism or civic nationalism or economic nationalism, in the case of Bannon, or what have you. And it just can't really be done. I mean, the whole country, we're not the same people, and we kind of hate each other. And yeah, it's a tragedy, but it is what it is. I don't. Again, I have no regrets. I have no ill will for what happened. I'm not in a state of gloom and doom. I'm just in a state of, look, the alt-right. We have to do this ourselves. We have to face the public. We have to communicate with average Americans and communicate with elites and intellectuals and so on. We need to build up a real movement. We're not just going to do this by, posting some Pepe memes and then, Trump will just do this all for us. The God Emperor will take it from here. It's not going to work like that.
You've put out a lot of interesting policy proposals. You've came out in support of a lot of unconventional ideas from a right-wing perspective, such as the basic income and nationalized healthcare. Can you talk about both of those issues and their benefits?
Sure. I mean, the national healthcare. I mean, those are similar issues. First off, this notion that we have some capitalist or free market healthcare is completely absurd. We have a totally screwed up healthcare system. We have basically socialized the insurance market, and we are operating through the insurance market in order to grant healthcare, which is just simply wrong. Insurance is there for a rainy day. It's there for when things go really bad. Insurance should not be used in the way that we're using it. And so what we end up in is spending the most per capita on healthcare. I mean, healthcare makes up 20% of the economy, which is just insane when you think about this. We have these huge bureaucracies. It's just a total disaster. And again, I could follow a liberal argument, or excuse me, a libertarian argument, and say, oh well, the market could take care of this. I mean, I might disagree with that to an extent, but I think they have a point. But the fact is, we don't live in this two-dimensional plane of pure rationality and arguments. We live in the three-dimensional world of human beings, and people just don't want to hear this. They don't trust it, for better and for worse. And so I think there's no question that a national system would be better for Americans. It would be pro-white in the sense that the kinds of people who are really suffering, who are having their job outsourced or automatized, who are suffering from the opioid epidemic, et cetera, are gonna obviously benefit. I think it just makes life simpler for a lot of middle class people.
And even Trump has expressed support for it in the past.
He has. There's no question. Basic income is also an interesting thing. I mean, this is something that Charles Murray has supported. It's interestingly. He's basically said that let's just cut out the middleman effectively. We use the redistribution system of the government endlessly to create all these new programs and so on, and funnel money in and out into people, and people who can game the system benefit, and blah blah blah. Why don't we just simply simplify things and have probably a graduated, that is means tested income tax going up the scale, and then just have a negative income tax going down the scale. So no one is going to be here as a citizen without a basic $20,000 income or something of this nature. Again, it's just radically simplifying things. And as I pointed out in my piece on national healthcare, which was at altright.com, there's almost a political benefit, maybe even a cynical benefit, you could say, of supporting many of these programs of national.
Because your point is that a lot of political dissidents are not outspoken because they're in fear of losing their healthcare benefits.
Yes, I mean, if we could get people on a basic income and a national healthcare system, I think there would be many people who would start to speak out because they know that their basic necessities are going to be taken care of. And beyond that, I think even normal people will start thinking about, they'll start thinking about the national system in a more racial way. They'll stop thinking about America as, oh, it's just a big free market. You just come here and make what you will. Make of your life what you will, get what you can, make a quick buck. And they'll start thinking of, no, we have our programs that are for us. And I do think that naturally tends towards immigration restriction and one, and then B, just having better immigrants. We don't want to bring in a bunch of refugees who are going to, sap the system.
Do you want to comment on the RAISE Act, which you're generally sympathetic to, but you have some reservations about it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sympathetic towards it. I think there's some good things about it, and so I wouldn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. The general ending of chain migration, I think, is very good. Chain migration back in 1965, when most immigrants were white, you could say was pro-white or benefited us, but certainly by the late 80s and 90s, and most definitely today, this is a radically anti-white measure. It's allowing Mexicans to Hispanics and so on to bring in their entire extended family. Getting rid of that is good. Now, where I objected to the RAISE Act was in this move towards high skill based immigration, and I get it. All things being equal, which immigrant would you want? A smart guy from India who's a coder and a doctor, or some, peon peasant from Mexico? Sure, on one basic level, you want the Indian. But on a deeper level, we want the white middle class to rise. We want them to be coders and doctors. And the RAISE Act never touched the H-1B visa issue as well, by the way. But, we want Americans to rise to these professions. We don't want to screw over the, kind of the right half of the bell curve, or that center right half of the bell curve, you could say. All these people with IQs in the 110 to 125 range, people who can be programmers or physicians or lawyers or so on. We want whites to do that kind of stuff. And just this idea that we would bring in all of these very smart people from India, from China, and so on. Again, these are populations with billions of people. That you could find smart ones, there's no question. I think would be very, very bad for white Americans. So I'm ambivalent about it. I think there's some good things about it. But again, I would hope that we could at some point, and I know this is, these things are fleeting, but just go back towards a 1924 style race-based immigration program.
So ideally, would you like to see a complete moratorium on immigration, or would you like to see something modeled on Israel's law, or to be a right of return for Europeans?
Well, I would say in the short term, a moratorium for, say, 25 years would be a very good thing. We have certainly enough people. But, look, as you know, I mean, I've been saying this for a while. I mean, so much is baked into the cake. I mean, by the summer of 2011, the majority of births were to non-white mothers. So, America's demographic destiny is baked into the cake. There was actually a study by the Washington Post that said that if Trump changed chain migration, he would maintain the white majority for an additional 5 to 10 years or something. So, I mean, all of this stuff is just not good enough. It's like some of these aging conservative boomers like Rush Limbaugh, who said, we'll allow in all the illegals. We'll have mass immigration, but they can't vote for 10 years. So we're gonna screw over our grandchildren.
Right. And if I could just interject here, this kind of
sure.
brings up a little bit this new tendency that we're seeing of these people that want to become like American white nationalists.
Oh,
and it's just kind of like Countercurrents had an article, and Anglin's been going on about that for a while. And now what you see is like the demographics just aren't there in order to win the kinds of majorities you would need to implement that. this idea of like you said, it's baked into the cake. Like you can make all kinds of arguments how America was originally founded as an Anglo-white country or whatever, but
Sure.
it's totally irrelevant because of where things are at now is what matters. Like what are you going to do? Like you're going to give a speech to a room full of Indians and Chinese, telling them to vote for American white nationalism. It's almost kind of like comical.
It's insane. Or we just need to wave a flag and we'll trick them all or something. I mean, that's a rather uncharitable reading of what they're saying. But yeah, I think after the midterm, a lot of this kind of stuff is going to die down. I think this is kind of like a residue of MAGA. I would also say this. I mean, I'm conflicted about America because I do think that there is. I mean, first off, I'm an American. I mean, I only have one passport. I was born here. I speak the English language. I like many parts of America. And the other thing is, I do think there's a redeemable American past. There is a certain, when you think about the cowboy, the explorer, the upright, maybe uptight businessman, the Southerner, the curmudgeon, either a rebel or Yankee, even the WASP and so on. There is some redeemable, you could say, types of American and again, I don't think we should reject these or engage in a kind of European style anti-Americanism where we just think every American is obese, eating himself to death at Burger King and, watching VR porn and with adopting, 20 Haitian babies and, all this kind of stuff.
I would be more sympathetic to it if they had some kind of like actionable pathway they were promoting, like towards some kind of like a mini America, through some form of balkanization. But this idea of like retaking America in its entirety, like, I mean, I've never heard any of these people have any kind of plan for how they're going to win California's crucial, like 55 electoral votes when like California is only like 45% white or something like that, or New York for that matter.
Yeah, or Texas in 5 years for that matter.
Right.
I mean,
the window is closing like within, last year. I mean, Trump won with like a paper thin margin, as a civic nationalist, and so they're trying to take it even further by running on like this like Buchananism, like plus like banning alcohol and pornography.
Right.
And
Trump isn't even a civic nationalist. He's basically a standard corporate Republican.
I agree. But it's safe to say that he ran maybe as a civic nationalist. He's definitely not. Once he was elected, then he became like kind of a normie Republican. But you could make the case that that he ran and he won as a civic nationalist.
Yeah, I agree. He
was able to.
And yeah, I mean, there are a couple of things here. I mean, to give them their most charitable reading, I'm reminded of something that Sam Francis said, which is that Sam Francis also believed that there was a redeemable America, as I said, and I agree with him, and that if we're going to become anti-American, if we're going to say, let's split up the country and have our little ethnic enclaves, burn the flag, we should, Vermont should go its own way, and the Dixie should go its own way, etc. He said that you're going to horrify and alienate yourself from the average American in the sense that they will see you as a flag burner and so on. And we want to do things that resonate with the average American. I think that there is, even if this is purely about tactics or aesthetics or symbols, I think there's a lot there. And the other thing is that the left is, it is increasing in intensity, and it is often rejecting the picket fence Americana, etc. But, I would just say this. First off, the left, you can find some truly anti-American leftists and so on in Berkeley or whatever you. But the fact is they are perfectly willing to pick up the flag again and drape themselves in it and talk about how they are the true American. Barack Obama came onto the scene in 2004 at the John Kerry convention, basically invoking civic nationalism and anti-racism. In fact, he said there is no Black America, there's no Chinese America, there's no white America, there is the United States of America. The left is perfectly able and willing to do things like this, and I would not be at all surprised that they would do things like this again. And the fact is, the American founding fathers, I don't know, there is this other meme, the American founding fathers were white nationalists. I really chafe at a lot of these things. It's not entirely wrong. I mean, they obviously had a strong sense of they had a sense of race. They had even a sense of ethnic identity, in terms of Germans and some other people coming in. They wanted an Anglo-Protestant community here. And so, I mean, I'm not going to deny that they weren't aware of race and so on. But again, it's the American founding. It was these aristocratic planters who were infatuated with Enlightenment ideals in terms of their legitimization of the country. And their fact is there are really big, glaring problems to American identity that even if someone like me wants to recognize that there is a redeemable aspect to it, that there are these huge, glaring problems in the sense that we have the worst civic identity. Even the French identity, which is, propositional in its way, which actually rivals the United States in being the proposition nation, still has a concept of peoplehood that American civic nationalism or what have you lacks. I mean, American nationalism has been in our lifetime. I mean, as a brand, it has been just defined by the civil rights movement, by non-discrimination, by individualism, by all these, Jefferson quotes that are to a degree taken out of context, but to a degree not, to be honest. That I don't know. The idea that we should just go back to this or get enraptured by all of these things, it is just a really big problem. I mean, America, in terms of geopolitics, this is America's world. I mean, we aren't just some little country like Finland or something who is at least has the excuse of being a victim of geopolitics and power. America is the dominant player in the world today, and I don't think anyone thinks that the world is headed in the right place. So to deny these ideological problems, these geopolitical problems, etc., and just say let's just MAGA, let's be worse than Trump, because Trump did run as a civic nationalist and he was viewed as a white nationalist. But now no, let's actually go back. Let's just be conservatives I'll grant the people making this argument some points. Like it's not a polemic in the sense that, or a Manichaean polemic. You're totally wrong, I'm totally right. No, I will grant them some. There's a tension here that we need to be very specific about. But I don't know that just this idea that this is the way forward. I thought we were all past this.
Right. And the comparison with that they use with these European political identitarian movements, it doesn't work because in those countries, they're in a much better demographic situation, number one.
Yes.
And then number two, in those countries, you can get parliamentary representation even with a small amount of the vote. So it's like in the U.S., even if you get all of these people together and you're able to get 40% of the vote or 30%, that wins you nothing in America. Whereas in these other countries, you get, they have runoff elections, representation in parliament. In the U.S., you get, if you have 30% of the vote, you really have no more power than a party that's got 5% or 2%. So it's all that matters is whether or not you're going to get enough to have the legislative majorities you need to overcome the judicial obstacles and the the filibusters and that kind of thing. Like, you need huge majorities, like 60, 70, 80% you would have to win. And those numbers just aren't there.
Right.
I have a question.
Francis Nelly, do you have a question?
Yeah, hold on. About a week ago, there was that huge, I guess it was called, I don't know, I think it was March Against the Guns. I actually wasn't in tune of it, but
March for Our Lives.
March for Our Lives, yeah. And the surprising thing about it, what I learned, was that supposedly the media was saying a lot of young people were being backed of it. And there was also, you might come across a Team Vogue article that says, look, these young millennials who like Harry Potter and Star Wars are putting it up to the man by showing that if teenagers can get rid of, at Hogwarts can get rid of Voldemort, then U.S. citizens can get rid of the NRA, and all this really goofy stuff. And it shows you that the state of the college or the university, that maybe SJWism is becoming more militant. I was just curious, what is your thoughts on this whole guns march and the millennial, this millennial attitude, and has it been more dangerous to now go to, is there any plans to even go to college or have tours this year, even if it's 2018? It seems like it's getting worse.
Oh yeah, well, I guess you have two questions in there. I'll answer the second one. I have basically suspended the college tour because it was, at least the college tour in the way that it was, because, keep in mind, a lot of these people naysaying, they weren't naysaying when it was working. We were able to thread a needle in late 2016 and the first half of 2017 where I could go to A&M or Auburn, and the system was working in our favor. So we went in, the university was not happy, but we could still use that platform, that a free speech public place. And both of those went great. Now, after Charlottesville and then with Florida and then with Michigan, the empire struck back in the sense. Sorry, I'm millennial. Using it. See, I'm stuck. I'm stuck in this.
You're resisting and get the boomers or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, that's Generation X. I mean, Richard and I think, are the same age. I was born in '78, so like that. Yes. Star Wars: Empire Strikes Back is definitely.
No, I was born. I'm the youngest. I'm
early '80s childhood.
Here, so I'm more of the young
guy. Yeah, I'm
here,
85.
Yeah, I'm the youngest. So.
So the Empire Struck Back. They figured out ways to make it very uncomfortable and to turn my events into mini Charlottesvilles where you have 500 Antifa and they're attacking people. I mean, look, I don't want to demoralize people, and I'm not trying to create a pitched battle. So I have rethought things. Now, I actually am going to be, and I'm not going to announce the day or the time or anything or the place, but I actually will be appearing in a much, much reduced capacity at a college. So the interest in identitarian ideas is really there. But we just need to find different ways and maybe smaller ways of doing it. So, it's going to happen, but it's just, I'm always recalibrating and rethinking things. I pride myself in being flexible. So, everyone don't worry. I'm in a process of rethinking my strategy, but there is going to be a strategy. I don't want, what we were doing stopped working. And so it's time to change. Any businessman knows this. Any, football coach, for God's sake, knows this. You have to rethink things. So that's where I am.
Well, it's like weird because a lot of, I'm a part of my own alt-right circles, and there is a lot of young people getting into this, identitarian, reading this online, but it's very small niche. And when you go to like a normal college, or especially on campus, you're seeing a lot more, not to sound pessimistic, really, more militant. You could say maybe that SJWism, they're growing more jaded and they're becoming militant. I mean, there was that kid. Oh, I'm forgetting. I saw it all over Facebook. It's like this kid with a clean cut doing this power to the man salute or something, saying, our daddy's got to go. And I'm like, it's kind of pinko and communist in a way, but at the same time, have the SJWs gone fascist?
Well, they look at where we are right now. What has been the the left-wing trend that has become really intense just over the past, really over the past year, but definitely over the past, say, year and a half. It's Antifa. And, I haven't actually even heard from Black Lives Matter recently. They are not the ones pushing the agenda. They kind of had their moment back in 2013, 2014. Now Antifa is it. Antifa is
it's like all the kids who went up to Hot Topic and the dead Kennedys about fucking off Nazi punks, and then they grew up and now they want to hate on Richard Spencer just because they're bad and mean people and they don't go into depth. But it's more scary and militant because it's also this. I see it everywhere. It's almost like young hip culture is now immediately Antifa without any. It's very strange.
Yeah, it is strange and it's more intense. BLM was out of control in many of their actions. So, when there would be there would be a police shooting of some man, maybe it was a little ambiguous. Maybe the police officer was guilty, which can happen. And then of course there's some BLM march, and then they block traffic and they burn down convenience stores and what have you. And in the most violent and intense situation, which I believe was the summer of 2015, there was that terrible shooting in Dallas, a sniper, which was terrifying. He was inspired by BLM to some degree, although he I seriously doubt BLM ordered him to do that. But at the same time, BLM always had a certain sympathetic air to it. I mean, not from us, but from your average normie, in the sense that who wouldn't say for them, oh, Black Lives Matter, and oh, police brutality is bad.
With
blah,
BLM,
blah, blah.
I mean, I don't support them or agree with them, but at least they're taking on a powerful institution. Antifa are picking on groups that are completely powerless.
Yes, that is another thing. As Gregory Hood wrote this, I believe, Antifa are the stormtroopers of the establishment. They are attacking physically the one group of people whom the establishment has targeted for non-personhood and who are actually attempting to change the system, i.e. us. But also they, at the same time, Antifa's popularity is with your average normie is next to zero. I mean, Black Lives Matter, with your average centrist normie, maybe they'd be like, oh, well, something should be done about this police violence issue. No one wants that. But your average normie views Antifa as just totally disgusting. And so things have become more intense. And there's, again, Antifa, BLM is about, justice, but it's kind of American in a way. Antifa is fundamentally about anarcho-communism.
Yeah, no, that's really weird, because it seems like, and that's what I'm actually saying, is that the Antifa culture, if you think what their biggest celebration was, the battle for Seattle, this was 20-something years ago, it seems to me these were young kids, or possibly late Gen X, and maybe early millennial, who were into hardcore punk, and it became fashionable to be Antifa and pick on evil racist people. And then all of a sudden, now that Antifa has the stage, it's yeah, the normie sees it repulsive. I think that's the good news. But at the same time, a lot of young people, they come from the middle of Cincinnati, Ohio, and then they go to New York for university, and then you could say get paused, and then they become a part of Antifa quote-unquote culture. And it's this weird thing that young whites, especially millennials, are falling into. And to me, it feels like it's a high school mentality. It just so happens that evil quote-unquote racist people are the targets, and they shouldn't really be. And it's almost like the alt-right Antifa are coming from two different worlds. I don't know.
Yeah, we're definitely coming from two different worlds. Although it is interesting, Lacey McCauley is kind of the Richard Spencer of Antifa, you could say. She has a advanced degree. She worked in various think tanks or something. If she would ever clean herself or change her horrible hair.
Oh, weren't you on a bench talking to her? I think it was a news report. I think it was ABC.
Yeah. I actually, they didn't include this, but I was I should have gone harder, to be honest. But yeah, you just need to change your hair and do all the stuff. There's probably a good-looking woman buried underneath all that.
I mean, that's exactly what I'm talking
Brandon,
about. It's like that
Brandon
smelly punk rocker type.
Yeah.
I don't know how to tell. It's like that woman. If she represents all of Antifa, it just goes to show you that it's like there's this kind of scenester or mentality where it's like, I want to be like that person, someone who believes in anarchy to a serious point. But then again, it's like a byproduct of like you're on a like I think it's mostly just a lot of kids on trust funds and they just want to be quote unquote liberated.
Oh, I don't think that. That might be the case for some. There's no question. But I will grant Antifa this: they might ultimately be tools of the system, ironically in a Marxian way, in an objective way, as they would say that. But I do think that they're genuine. The most of them are genuine, and they are true gutter punks. Lacey McCauley is a bit of an exception to that rule, but they look genuine. Most of them that I see, there's no way in hell they have a trust fund or they could ever be working in industry or something. I mean, they are they are strung out.
People don't really want to admit this on either side, but both the alt-right and the Antifa movement are phenomenons of the millennial generation lacking the economic opportunities.
I agree with that assessment. And you do see some Gen Xers in Antifa, and I'm sure there are even some boomers, but I think you're generally right. It's the alt-righter. I mean, that stereotype is wrong. Like, oh, it's you're just some autistic kid in your basement watching anime porn or whatever. But the fact is, and I say this sympathetically, there are a lot of people who don't feel like they have a stake. They don't feel like they have skin in this game. They're sitting on college loan debt. They're sitting on either a crappy job or no job, and they are almost living online, and they're achieving community with people in forums and so on. And a lot of these tend to alt-right. Now, I'm not saying that to demean anyone. I'm just saying it is what it is. I understand where they're coming from. But yeah, I mean, I think you're right. And obviously, our view should always be about ascending. So it's kind of like, yeah, my life sucks. I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't get a girl, but I want to be better. I imagine a better world where we do have stability and order and families and so on. The Antifa, tact, they just want to see the world burn, and it really is because however you want to talk about me being a romantic or whatever, talking about the ethno-state or Europeanism or whatever. I mean, and I'm being serious, like I'm trying to be as charitable as possible. They have no ideology outside of like Hulk smash,
Well, their philosophy is basically. Okay, so their only philosophy I could say is Crime Think, which is an anarchist organization in California, and I have some of their books, but you're pretty much right, yeah, Hulk smash, but it's also this ideal where they're quote-unquote fighting for our lives and that everything is oppressive and evil, and supposedly they also have this weird Star Trek Borg mentality where they believe in
they do.
Where it's like if someone in the community is offended, you don't approach that people. You got to wear a mask. And then all of a sudden, when the day comes, you gotta kick out the Nazis because all the police, the system, the capitalist system is inherently fascist and evil and going against this human nature, and the world should be liberated. It's really weird if you look into anarchist theory, and I strongly believe every Antifa has at least looked at Crime Think books, but I don't know. That's just something I realize, or they just listen to too much hardcore punk. But yeah.
Brandon Adamson has this concept called the alt-left, or now he calls it left of the alt-right. Brandon, do you want to explain your ideology? And Richard, can you comment on that?
Sure.
Well, it's basically, it used to be, it's at altleft.com. It used to be, before Trump completely ruined the term by using it to refer to Antifa and these groups. But it was basically people who were pro-white or identitarian, but much more liberal on other issues, based on the fact that so often you see people in the pro-white community, they automatically seem to want to package being pro-white with all of these other all of their other pet issues, like Catholicism or
Right.
That you're banning alcohol, banning pornography, all this other stuff that it's just kind of taken for granted that you're some kind of hardcore social conservative. Basically, like they're basically like a white nationalist, like a Rush Limbaugh, like if he was white nationalist or something like that, or Pat Buchanan or something like that. They just assume that you're like that. But I think that there is, even going back as far, there's always been there's nothing inherently about being pro-white that says that you've got to sign on to all of these other items, because in a way it actually makes more sense for people on the left to be interested in these issues, because if you look at things like immigration, in order to have like a functioning socialized healthcare system and tariffs and all these things, you need to maintain a delicate balance where it's not going to work. If you're just kind of a conservative, you may not necessarily need that, but you actually need these things for a lot of the other systems to work. So it's basically just that. I guess it was. I always kind of considered myself on kind of the left of the alt-right, and then in the last couple of years, then you started to get. It became more about this hardcore social conservatism, like banning pornography and a white Sharia and all of these other memes, like trad this and trad that. Like, so I think it's like kind of pushed out some of the other people that were like,
cool guys,
more like,
yeah,
right, like Jim Goad and things like that. Like,
yeah,
you know what I'm talking about? Like,
yeah, well, I would say that I'm fairly alt-left in that sense, in the way that I'm willing to go there on, say, socialized medicine or so on. I certainly give Christianity its due, but I've never been a Christian in the way that many of them are, and I don't think that we should just have some kind of reactionary thing of let's all go back to Latin Mass and drink chocolate sundaes at the drive-in or something. I think that is a kind of nostalgia for a few decades ago, and it is not that helpful. I think we should reach more of a higher synthesis. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't many really terrible things about the way the world's going, and how there can be solutions to this that come from tradition that we can draw upon. You mentioned the porn question. I mean, I think pornography is a quite terrible thing, but not quite in the way that a lot of traditionalists think it is. I think we're almost entering a simulacrum world where one of the most human basic things, which is making love and reproduction. But even the act itself, obviously reproduction is the end, but even the act itself is a deeply human thing that is a maybe not quite an end in itself, but it's close.
It's almost like every white girl today aspires to be a porn actress, where she's like, oh, I've slept with 30 guys and I'm 20 years old. That's literally like a millennial girl mentality. It's
horrifying, and it's almost and also taking like degenerate acts from pornography into the real world. But there's a flip side to it, which is that we seem to be living in this simulacrum world where we don't make love, and instead we watch porn
and enact it out.
Yeah.
Well,
and
I think that's
a very dangerous place we're going. So I do think that tradition, we can call upon tradition, and not just a Christian tradition, but a deep European tradition. I think we can really call upon things like that. So I'm not anti-tradition, but I agree with you. I resonate a lot with the alt-left in the way that you described it, a willingness to get out of that right-left dichotomy, which is really fake. I mean, I described it in one speech I gave called Beyond Conservatism, as actually, I take that back. I described it as a jigsaw puzzle where the pieces don't fit. I think Paul Gottfried called it thought clusters, and we're both getting at the same thing, and that is, if you're pro-white and you are an identitarian, why would you therefore oppose environmentalism? Because you're, quote, on the right. Why would you therefore be pro-big business?
Exactly. A lot of these SWIPL things have a lot of value to them, like environmentalism and new urbanism and
It's
local
also
business.
true that I
Well,
always thought that, a part of being also alt left is something like, as Brandon was saying, that, it seems to be that there's a lot of trad people out there. But it's also true that I really think that, and not to sound like Milo, it's like I think there
Yeah.
could be alt-right gays, even though that sounds contradictory. I still think there could be homosexual or bisexual allies, and you could still do like sweple things, and yet be kind of anti-liberal. Have a post-liberalism,
well,
and yeah,
yeah, that's the thing. It's also by design too. If you think about it, that people fall into this trap because like the other side, like they want to pigeonhole you as this kind of like really like this kind of hillbilly mentality. So it's kind of like if you said that you were like pro-white or that you're into white identity or something, they'd be like, well, why do you hate gays? Because
that's
they
exactly
already
right.
have like pigeonholed you into this thing, and these people are all too willing to accept what's projected onto them. And I think that it's also kind of funny because a lot of these same people will talk about normies and optics and like and waving the flag, and like do they not realize that like some of this other stuff is seen as like almost just as like cringeworthy by like large segments of the people, like some of this other stuff that they're advocating.
And yeah, just when it comes to the issue of culture and aesthetics, a lot of conservatives fetishize like a lot of really awful stuff like Walmart's, track housing, mega churches. Well, ironically, liberals tend to prefer a more traditional European aesthetic. Like there's the whole new urbanist movement.
Or that it's more cool. I think a lot of liberals do have better taste in music and art, even though we could say the pause is there. I just think the best part of the alt-right is try to get that pauseness out of like the urban, swipple, fine art, vegan restaurant, punk rock, interracial dating, and turn it into like this, if you want to say alt-right or some kind of strange post-liberal, no more SJWism. And I see that happening in the YouTube
Take
sphere.
the best from the left. I totally agree. Like this left-right divide is used to keep a 49%, 51% political status quo going indefinitely. It's like, I wonder if the Democrats are going to make a comeback in the fall. Ooh, could Trump get reelected next to? I mean, it's just this endless cycle that goes nowhere. And they choose certain issues to divide us on, and they don't make sense. They're a jigsaw puzzle in which the pieces don't fit. As I said, there's no reason for a true traditionalist, to then oppose environmentalism or to be against art. Or to love mega churches and with Starbucks, centers in them and so on. Actually, we're trying to synthesize things. We're trying to bring our people out of this divide, which is ultimately leading towards our destruction. Now, again, that doesn't, again, on a lot of things, I probably am conservative in a lot of ways. I think there is a real left and right on a kind of existential scale, but in terms of policies and so on, no, I think we should try to get away from this stuff.
This is a little off topic, but what do you think about the whole sort of retro futurist aesthetic that's become popular? I guess you see it with fashion wave, but it's a whole genre.
Yeah, I've been promoting this for a while. I think the retrofuturism in terms of fashion wave was really great. I've actually noticed a group that I don't really know that much about, but what are they called? Patriot Front, and I've seen some other people. And again, I don't know enough about the group to endorse them or not, but they were kind of getting at a European Roman kind of fasci Americana.
And so yeah, you see these images. It's a hybrid of like an ancient Roman city with like a 80s neon city,
or like a Windows 95 background.
All right.
Like Windows.
So Richard, when you get your own country, will that be the aesthetic of your capital city? Yes, we will just live. We will live in Tron. basically world. That's what the ethno-state will look like.
Well, I think a lot of
Get
this.
ready, everyone.
I think a lot of this. It's funny we're talking about this. I wrote something of an article about it. It was about fash wave sectarianism versus vaporwave hegemony. Like, it's weird because fash wave seems to be like the alt-right version of vaporwave. Because if you look at vaporwave, there's a lot of, I guess, left-wing things. But I think the answer should be like, there's no doubt about it that the paradigm today is
the
a vaporwave.
premise of vaporwave is borrowing from consumerism, but then borrowing from that and creating something beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, but yeah, and I can see where fash wave takes it, like, and what Patriot Front is doing, where it's like it's almost as if vaporwave is almost having more power over the alt-right. Like, we see aesthetics. Like, maybe that's it. Maybe aesthetics are more important than the political message. And maybe people base political opinions like what we see with Antifa. If Antifa are just a bunch of...
The left always recognized exactly what you just said.
Mm.
I mean, the left won music.
Yeah, exactly. And like, if you're into crust punk, you're an Antifa. But if you're like some nerd, listen to like Macintosh Plus or Eco Jams, and then you find out about
there's Excurious.
Yeah, and then you become like this alt-right kid who's disgruntled about like liberalism, but you like vaporwave. But again, the aesthetic is more powerful than the political. Like, it's also almost like, this is why I'm going to go with Brandon here. There needs to be an alt-left so we can have more art and music, and then think about politics later. Just persuade people about this stuff and know, that stuff is wrong and fuddy-duddy because they don't really understand the true artists, which is probably everyone right now in this chat room.
Well, a big problem, though, is that there are so many people that just aren't on the same page at all. And that's like, when you look closer at this, you really see it, that you have people that are just all over the place. And that's why there's so much like drama and infighting all the time, is because you have the time when you see all of these groups united is when there's some kind of a happening, like a Black Lives Matter riot or something like that. Or like the 2016 election. The minute that there's a lull in anything, that's like everyone just turns on each other, because really these factions are just so different and so like in conflict with each other. Christians and atheists and people who are more socially liberal, and then the people that are just like that their number one priority is destroying degeneracy. You have those people, and in fact, any time you make any kind of comment or something, like, it's almost like, not to sound too like horseshoe theory, because that's lame, but you have this parallel culture where even in the alt-right, if you say the wrong thing about this or that, like, they still they jump all over you and try to ostracize you. And even this has happened to Spencer plenty of times, right?
Oh,
he's made some comments on a podcast. It's almost like what happened. It's like the same thing that happens to people like Lacey Green on the other side. It's just kind of like, say one thing that's out of step, or just like an intellectual thought experiment. Well, maybe this, this is empirically true. And then, but
there was some case recently where Richard said something about pornography and Nick Fuentes freaked out. Remember that?
Oh, of course I remember it. Now, I actually spoke with Nick, and I mean, Nick is a young kid, and I'm not saying that to demean him. He's 19. He's probably probably will be 20 pretty soon. So I am twice his age. So it's kind of funny. I do think he has a lot of talent, and so I hope we can get past that. But yes, I made a provocative point. I was actually making a similar point to what I was discussing before.
This was about how porn reduces sex drives.
Right. Porn.
Well, no, it was, yeah. And also like about how
the universe. Yeah, porn takes you into simulacrum, and so you're living online. So in a weird way, porn is not actually inspiring sex or inspiring rape. It is supplanting it or replacing it. And so, actually people who might be abusive and are rapists or molesters or something, when if they live in that, simulacrum world of porn, they're actually less likely to abuse people. And there again, this is look. I almost hesitate making this point because it just rubs people the wrong way. I am not endorsing any of this. Studies have done this. Studies have obviously. I didn't even mention what they jumped on. I had never heard that someone is claiming that I supported ethical child. I mean, needless to say, that is totally appalling, and I don't. But I was making a difficult point, and people spazzed out in the sense of like, we finally got him. See, he said, when I said nothing of the kind. You can disagree with what I said. Let's have a discussion about it. But
right, you point out a statement that's like, this is, this studies have shown this is empirically true, and it's completely like taken out of context to into this meme, and they just like run with it, like and attack. Like it's just, I've seen it. It happens so many times. Like not just to you, but really just to anyone. And it really is kind of this like a parallel culture where like suddenly, like the whole reason you get into this movement is because you want to have intellectual debates with anything is on the table, really, and then you discuss them, and now you're like you're back in this same old thing again, like
where we have to we're back in some new place, or we have to be dogmatic, or we have to speak like politicians. I don't speak like a politician. I'm not going to recite dogma or recite talking points to you all day long. Like, hey guys, we're here, we're pro-white, and that means like, bringing back the good old-fashioned values. Like, guys, tomorrow's it's going to be.
I always thought everyone in here is just an artist, and we're just a misunderstood artist, and we do whatever what we want to do.
We're not going to gain anything by that. Like, part of why we've made the impact that we have, and we have changed the conversation. Part of why is because we're willing to go there. We're willing to take risk. We're willing to talk about things that make people uncomfortable, that rub them the wrong way. I don't think we can ever we should ever lose that. If we ever lose that, we're going to just descend into either pro-Trump cheerleading, pro-GOP cheerleading, or just conservatism plus we hate the Jews. So it's like, oh yeah, I'm a conservative, but the Jews are they're the true Democrats. Or whatever. It's just no. That this is not what a real functioning identitarian movement is about. And we are going to become very, very boring if that is what we become about.
We are at the end of the show. Before I wrap things up, Richard, do you have any last words for our audience?
No. If you want to hear more, we do a weekly podcast called Alt-Right Politics, and you can find us at altright.com.
Yeah, it's like the successor to the McLaughlin Group.
Yeah, well, we are not the successor. We are actually the true McLaughlin Group.
I'd like to ask Richard one more thing. Richard, do you know about Minimal Wave Records? Do you know about that?
I've never heard of that.
Because it's basically like a synth pop label that's like, it sounds like Depeche Mode and stuff like that. But I swear, when you first introduced that like alt-right logo, and it was like it was like, and then I looked at the Minimal Wave Records logo. You have to Google search this. I thought to myself, I think Richard Spencer is listening to synth pop and adding it as a political ideology. And I swear to God, he took it from Minimal Wave Records. But I
wasn't familiar with Minimal Waves, but it does have that very 80s retro look to it.
Yeah, it says MW. And then when I saw AR, I remember that. I think this was like 3 years ago, that Pref Concerts. And then people said, why the logo? And I think you said like something, it's cool, it's hip, it's urban. I'm just thinking to myself, just like Minimal Wave Records. And I'm like, wow, it's an ideology now. But yeah, that's something I think it's funny.
It was. I was certainly inspired by some Depeche Mode logos from the 90s as well that had that big DM and that block like way and yeah. I think I think we should harken back to stuff like that. We're gonna get further, particularly at this point where Trump has kind of petered out. We're gonna get further by winning over artists, by winning over intellectuals who want to get below the surface, who want to think thoughts that are dangerous and seemingly and thoughts they'd never thought before. We're going to get further with those people than by wrapping ourselves in the American flag and saying that we're conservatives.
Richard Spencer, it's been an excellent show. I'd like to thank you for being on.
Thank you. Anytime. Hopefully I'll come on sooner than later. I think it has probably been at least it must be 2 years since I came on, so we'll do it before another year goes by for sure.
Excellent, and also thanks Francis Nally and Brandon Adamson.
Thanks, guys.
Nice talking to you guys, like always.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. That's good.
All right.
All right.